Hello again, and welcome back to Educator.com's Advanced PHP with MySQL course. In today's lesson, we're going to learn how to retrieve data from our database using the SQL SELECT command. We're going to go over the syntax of the SELECT command, and then we're going to talk about two different clauses that you can add, which are basically sort of additions you can add to the SELECT command that define, the where clause defines, it will allow you to restrict what rows from a table you want to retrieve, and the order by clause is going to allow us to specify when we retrieve rows from a table using the select command what order, how we want them ordered. We want the results ordered. So the select command, or query as it's often called, is used to retrieve rows from a database that match specified criteria that we choose. Now, sometimes it's called a select command, sometimes it's called a select statement, sometimes it's called a select query or just a query. I'll sort of use those terms intermittently, mostly be using the term query. So if I say we're executing a query on the database, that's going to be saying that we're executing a select command on the database, which is going to retrieve data from the database. And basically what the select command, the basic syntax for the select command is you have the select keyword, and then you specify the names of the columns that you want to retrieve data for, specified or separated by commas. So we're saying, give me the data associated, the values for column 1 and column 2, and then the from keyword from table name, and you specify the table name. So this would say, give me all the values for the column for column 1, all the values for column 2 from the table named by table name. And what happens is the select query actually returns its results in a tabular format, ordered by how they're listed in the query, how the columns are listed in the query. So for example, if we ran this query, we would get a result. It's called a result set. It's basically a table of data, and it would have two columns in it, because we specified two columns that we want to retrieve data for, and then would have the values of each row in this in the table name. So if we have a table called, in this case, table name, this query would retrieve the values for the column 1 name column and the column 2 name column for every row in table name table, and it would list them in a tabular format. The order in which these columns are going to appear is the order when we specify them here. If we had switched it around, then these would be reversed in the result set. And again, the term result set is used to refer to basically the table of data that is returned when you execute a select query. If you want to retrieve all of the columns from a table, which is something you often want to do, you can use the wildcard in place of the list of column names. So we could type a query, and this is something that we talked about in the homework example for the last lesson, and we used when inserting items into the database to verify that they were inserted, which we didn't go over, but we said select star from items, and basically what that's saying is give me all of the columns, the values for all the columns for all the rows in the items table. And what it's going to do is it's going to return a table like this, a result set that's going to have values for all the different rows in the table, for all of the columns for all the different rows in the table. The thing to note is that the order of these columns in the result set are going to be ordered by how the table is defined. So for example, when we did an insert statement where we just specified values and didn't specify column names, we had to specify those values in the order in which the columns were defined for that particular table. That's how this select star statement is going to work as well. It's going to return the data and have the columns ordered by how they were defined in the table definition. So if we actually go and let's log into our MySQL server as a PHP user. So I'm going to run the MySQL monitor program. I'm going to go ahead and have us so that we're already using the advanced PHP database. And then what I'm going to do is, if I run describe items, again, it's going to show us the format of this items table. So it has the columns ordered in this order here: item ID, name, price, description image file extension. I'm going to run a select query that's going to retrieve all of the information from the table, but I'm going to do it by specifying each of the column names individually. And as happened in the last lesson, because the descriptions are longer, it's actually going to run off the page. But I'm going to do it to show you an example of how this works to specify all the columns. So we're saying select all of these different columns from the table items. Oops, looks like I had an error in my statement. And you can see here it kind of runs off the page, but it returns all of the different columns that we're looking for. You can see one thing to note is it also gives you it says 6 rows in set, which means that there were 6 rows that were returned by this query. The same way we could run the same exact query in a similar format by using the star. Say select star from items, and we're going to get the exact same results. Now, as you actually saw me do in the last lesson, which I didn't really explain, was you can select just certain columns from the particular table. Let's say we just want the item ID, name, and price of each item in the database. Well, we could say give me the item ID, the name, and the price for all the rows in the items table. And you can see it returns 6 rows, and it contains the item ID, the name, and the price. And so this is sort of your result set. And notice that they're ordered in the result set columns are ordered in the way that you specified them. We could alternatively have specified them in a different order. For example, price, name, and now they're switched. And this becomes a little important when we get into interfacing with this database using PHP because we're going to be accessing these result sets. And so the order that these columns are ordered in when the results to return is actually going to matter. So that's sort of why I'm talking about it now. So the commands that we just ran select all of the rows from a particular table. Typically, when you're running a query on a table, you're actually going to want to be getting a subset of that particular data. For example, you might want to look up a particular item in the database. Maybe, for example, when we have item.php, which is our item page on our store web application, when we load that page up, now we're going to be, when we convert it over to using a MySQL database, we're going to be loading up that item's information from a database. So we're going to be basically selecting a row from the items table that corresponds to the particular item that we want to use. And we're going to use the item ID to look it up. And the item ID is the primary key of that table, which is why we have the primary key, so we can uniquely look up that row. The way you do that in a select query is by adding what's known as a where clause. And a where clause contains what's called a where condition, which is basically a Boolean expression that if it evaluates true for a particular row, then it will turn that row from the database. So for example, here we have a select query with a where statement added. So we're saying, give me all of the columns from the items table for all of the rows where this where condition is true, where item ID equals 1001. Well, we know that item ID 1001, item ID is a primary key, so this should only return one row from our table, and so that's going to allow us to just return information about item 1001. So if we run select, and I'm just going to return name and price so that it's easier to see from items, and what you do is you use the key after the from and then the table name, you specify the where keyword, and then you specify your where condition. And in this case, it's a comparison operation, and what it's saying is where item ID equals the number 1001. Now in PHP in our code, this would actually be a double equal sign. It's a comparison operator, but in SQL, it just uses a single equal sign. So we're saying, give me all the rows in the database, give me the item ID, the name, and the price for all the rows in the items table where the item ID equals 1001. And when we run this query, we're going to see that we only get one row, and that's because it's 1001 is a primary key, and so there's only one row in the table that has that, as by definition that's what a primary key is. Now these where conditions can contain both logical and comparison operators. We saw a comparison operator there where we were saying item ID, the item ID column is equal to this. The thing to note here also is that these item ID here in the where condition specifies it, that refers to a column. So basically you're specifying conditions on columns in the table. So we're saying where column item ID equals 1001. Something else you could do, for example, there are other comparison operators, all the typical ones you'd expect: greater than or equals to, not equal to. For example, we could say give us all of the ones where the price column is greater than 15. So all of the items where price is greater than $15. You can also use logical operators such as or, and not to say, like, give me where item ID equals 1001 or 1002. And you can combine these into statements just as you can within PHP. So for example, let's say we want to get the information for item ID 1001 or item ID 1002. We can use this or logical operator and say item ID equals 1002. Oops, got the equal sign. Now we can see we get two rows because this statement says give me the item ID, the name, and price for all rows and items where this condition is true. Item ID equals 1001 or item ID equals 1002. That's only true for two rows in the table, so we get two rows, and these are the values that returned. Now alternatively, we could say, let's say we did item 1007. We're only going to get one row back because item ID is never equal to 1007 in the current status of our table. So we only get one row set. So that's another thing to note, is that if the condition evaluates false, you don't get any, or if it doesn't match anything, you won't get any rows back. We could have just said where item ID equals 1007, and we're going to get an empty set. We're going to get a result set with 0 rows in it because no rows in the table have item ID equal to 1007. So now let's try another comparison operator. Let's say give me all the items in the table. Well, first of all, let's take a look at all of the items in the table, their names, their prices, their item IDs. And let's say we want to get all of the items that are have a price greater than $15. So we're going to say select the item name, the item ID, the name, the price from items where price, which is the name of the column, is greater than 15, which is a literal value. And you hit enter, it's going to show that 1002 through 1006, all of those items come back. Another thing we could do is let's also have it return image file extension. So these are the values for all of our the item ID, the name, price, and image file extension from items. And what we're going to do is we're going to show how to combine some of these operations to basically have a more complex query where we're going to return all the items, for example, that are JPEGs that have a JPEG image extension that are greater than $15. So before we do that, I just want to talk about how to specify literal values within where clauses. And it works just like you do when we use our insert statement. If you're searching, if you're comparing, if you're running a where condition on a column that's a string data type, you have to include the string that you're searching for in quotation marks because it's a string. So for example, this query is saying give me all of the columns from the items table for all of the rows where image file extension equals JPEG. One thing to note is that with our insert statement, if you're searching for text values or string values that have the quotation marks as part of the string, you need to escape them with the backslash. The other thing to note that we actually just saw was for numeric literals, just as in the insert statement, you don't enclose them in quotation marks. You simply just write the numeral as is. So for example, let's pull the item ID, the name, the price, and the image file extension from items. And let's do it where image file extension equals JPEG. And notice we're enclosing JPEG in single quotes, quotation marks. We're going to see that we get 4 results because there's 4 items in our table that have JPEG as the image file extension. Well, now let's make this query even a little more restrictive. and we're going to add an and condition to this where condition, and we're going to say where the image file extension equals JPEG and the price is greater than $15. So we have two conditions that each row has to meet in order to show up in our result set. And if we look at the results that we just got from where image file extension equals JPEG, there are 4 rows, but only 3 of them have a price greater than $15. Or if we run this query, we should get 3 rows. And in fact, we do. We get the 3 rows where the JPEG is the image file extension and the price is greater than $15. So we learned how to select columns from a table. We've learned how to specify particular rows that we want to pull from a table. We also can specify how we want the results ordered. For example, when these queries are run, they just go through the table 1 row at a time and pull each row that meets these particular criteria. So in this case, they're all actually being ordered by item ID because that's the way they were entered. They're going through the way they were entered into the table. So because we entered item ID 1004 before item ID 1005, when we run this query, it shows up with item 1004 listed before item 1005. Well, we could change that. Let's say we wanted to order everything by the price. Let's say we have a sometimes you go to websites and you can sort the items in a particular department by price. Well, what we could do is we could run a query on a database that says, give me all the items in a particular department and order them from highest to lowest price. And then what would happen is you can create an SQL query that's going to order them by price in the order that you want. That's what the order by clause allows to do. So for example, we could, and you specify it after the from items, or from in the table name part of the select command. You specify the keywords order space by, and then you specify the column name, and this is the column name that you want to order things by. So if we want to order things by price, we would specify select star from items order by price. So for example, again, I don't want to pull all of the information up because it'll go off the screen. We're going to pull up the item ID, name, and price from the items table, and we're going to order it. We're not going to include a where clause here. We're going to order it by price. Oops. Now we can see that they're all ordered, as opposed to 1001, 1002, 1003. They're ordered in ascending order according to price. One of the other things that you can do when you specify an order by clause is after the name of the column that you're ordering by, you can also specify DESC for descending, which means order them in descending order. Now the default is ascending, which you can also explicitly specify with ASC. But let's go ahead and do this in descending order by price. We're going to do it in descending order, and now we can see that they're organized in descending order by price. The other thing that you can do is you can order by multiple columns. So for example, let's say we wanted to order have all of the items that have the image file extension JPEG show up first, and then have all of those items after they're ordered according to image file extension, then order them by price. So this would say, give us all of the rows, all the columns for all the rows and items in the items table, order them by image file in ascending order by image file extension. Because image file extension is a string, it's going to do them in alphabetical order. And then after they're ordered according to image file extension, then order them by price. So if we run this command now, select item name ID, and let me add image file extension to our list of columns that we're going to be returning. Put order by on its own line. So we're going to order by image file extension, and then we're going to order that by price. Now what we can see is that first off, it's been sorted according to the image file extension. Here G is before J in the alphabet, so all of the GIF items are listed first, and then within the GIF items, they're sorted according to price. And within the JPEG items, they're sorted according to price, 15, 34.99, 59.99, 79, and so forth. Again, the default sort order is ascending, and so that's why GIF is listed before JPEG and 15 is listed before 79.99. In these more complex order by queries where we're ordering by multiple columns, we can also specify descending order for each of the different columns we're ordering by specifying the descending modifier after each column name. So let's say we want to order them both in descending order. we could specify descending twice, and you have to include it directly after the name of the column that you want to specify it by. And here, just to, if I hadn't explicitly said it, you want to separate the columns that you're ordering by a comma. And now when we run this query, we can see that JPEGs come first, and then they're listed in descending order of price. And so there are a lot of different combinations that you can do with this to get the data in the way that you want. So basically, we have a way to select columns from rows in a table. We have a way to specify what rows we want from a table, and then we have a way to specify the order. So we can kind of put this all together by using select queries that have both where and order by clauses. So let's say we want the item ID, the name, the price, and item file extension from items, and we're going to specify a where clause where price is greater than $15. And then we simply, after that, to include an order by clause, we include a space, and then order by price descending. So we've combined both a where condition and an order clause to get this result set. So this is going to say, give me the values for item ID, name, price, and image file extension for all rows in the items table where their price column has a value greater than 15, and then order those results, order those rows in descending order by price. So now when we run it, we can see we have all of our items, which is 5 items out of 6 that have a price greater than $15, and they're ordered in descending order by price. And so as you can see, we can get some really sort of complex queries, and it's a very extremely powerful statement that we can use to basically do all sorts of different things for getting whatever information we want out of our database, which is a lot of power of, in a way, the select statement is sort of the granddaddy of all SQL statements. That's really where a lot of the power lies in relational databases. So for the homework challenge, I just basically want you to practice running some select queries. So you'll log into MySQL database using MySQL Monitor, log in as the PHP user, and then run a couple of these select queries. And basically what I've done is defined in this list basically describe the kind of queries I want you to write. And then what you'll have to do is determine where to add a where clause, whether to add an order by clause, whether to use a star, whether to specify the columns individually, and so forth. And then what I've done is after each each bullet point represents a separate query I want you to run, I've specified the number of rows that you should get back. So in this case, these first two are both going to should return 6 rows, assuming you have the default setup, which we did in the last lesson, which has the default 6 items in our store. And then basically that way you can have a check to make sure that you're writing the query right. It's at least a partial check to make sure that you're you're writing the right query and you're getting the appropriate number of results. So for example, for the second one, I want you to get the item ID, the name, and the price values for each row in the table. And in this case, because it's for each row, we're not actually going to specify a where condition. So this one would just be a select statement that would say select item ID, name, price from items. Basically told to answer that one, and it's going to turn six rows back. Then we're going to do a couple different things. You're going to get practice using the OR operator. Give me the have a where clause that has an OR, where item ID equals 1001 or 1004. You're going to use the greater than symbol. We're going to combine some of these, so you're going to get to use the and condition of a where condition. So you're going to say if the price is greater than a certain amount and an image file extension equals a certain amount. Remember to include strings and quotations. And then you get practice with the ordered by clause. You can order by, we're going to have you order by price in descending order. And then just going to get more and more complex queries just to give you practice with writing these queries, because they can get really long and complex, and they're going to be prone to errors, and you're going to make errors, and that's okay. And I encourage you as much as possible to do all of these examples, homework examples, really get your hands dirty with it, because it's something you really just kind of need to do to get a feel for it and to become comfortable with it. And I encourage you to experiment with any queries on your own. Maybe make up a query. Say I want to get all of the, I want to get the name and file extension of all items that have an item ID greater than 1002, for example. And then maybe you'll specify I want to order them according to name in descending order. So there'll be an alphabetical order, descending alphabetical order by name, and so forth. And just feel free to play around with it as much as you want. You're not going to break the database, and it'll give you practice writing these queries and so forth. So that ends today's lesson. Thank you for watching educator.com and look forward to seeing you next time.